Thanks, Kiri. So welcome to the second session of the summer series focused on purpose. We are the Purpose Group, the PRCA. Our aim is for this three-part series to hear from a broad spectrum of thought leaders who can facilitate discussion on the given topic, collating insights from these events to produce at the end of the year a PRCA Purpose report, which can be shared with you through the PRCA website at that point. Today we've been joined by the incredible talented group of people we have here today. So Sam Sutaria, who is Head of Strategy at the WaterBear Network. You have to do your, yeah, that. Ali Russell, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Extreme E. Thank you. And Maya Mela, who is a campaigner and activist and co-founder of the grassroots movement Mothers Rise Up, who you may have seen outside Downing Street yesterday. Maya has agreed to join us at the very last minute today as Penny from the WWF was unfortunately unwell. So thank you so much, Maya, for stepping in, and get well soon, Penny.
Thanks very much, Chloe. I'm Daniela Flores, the other co-chair of the PRCA Purpose Group. Just a bit more housekeeping in terms of Q&A. So we're going to hear from the panelists for the next 30 minutes now. If you have any questions, please do submit them in the Q&A chat box on the screen, and then we'll do sort of a Q&A session at the end for about 15 minutes. Obviously, really appreciate everyone joining us. Obviously, we're talking about purpose-related issues that everyone really cares about. The environment obviously is one of those top of the list. We'd love to make an interactive session, but we've got quite a lot of people, so do send in any questions you have, whether it's for the panel as a whole or to individuals afterwards, and we'll be happy to answer them if we can. We also wanted to make it a bit interactive by having a Twitter poll. So for those of you who are on Twitter, if you want to go onto the PRCA Twitter account, you can enter the hashtag PRCA Purpose. And we've got a few questions which we thought would be interesting just to get people's views during the session whilst you're listening to the panelists. So we've got three questions for you. One is, the environment needs to be a backbone of the global COVID-19 recovery. What sources of communication will be most effective in telling this story? And there's a few options for you to choose from. Second question is about what businesses should do to prioritise the environment. And the third question is, after COVID, what should be the priority for businesses? So if you get a chance over the next half an hour, hop on, put in your answers. At the end of the session, we'll check in, find out what the results are, and discuss them before we close up.
Thanks. And so we've heard a lot about building back better after COVID-19. So this means different things to different people. It would be great to hear from each of our panelists today what it means to you and your organisation. And if we kick off with Maya, just to, you know, great to hear about yesterday as well, but some thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. It is really timely. So just yesterday, I was outside 10 Downing Street holding a giant wind turbine together with my 3 kids and my partner. And about 50 other mums and dads who had assembled outside Downing Street to call on the Prime Minister to secure a just and green recovery. And that coincided with a letter from over 100 prominent parents calling for the same thing. But perhaps I'll go back and explain a bit how it was that I ended up in front of Downing Street with a wind turbine, which is, I guess, not something you do every day. So my background is actually as an aid worker and as a campaigner on humanitarian issues. So I was with Oxfam for about 8 years as head of humanitarian campaigns and policy, and I've lived in places like South Sudan and Congo and Mali, and I've spent a lot of time on the border with Syria. And to be honest, at that time, of course, I was aware of the climate crisis and I saw it firsthand, but it really didn't feel like the priority issue compared with some of the kind of human rights abuses that I was seeing on an everyday basis, and compared with what was happening in terms of refugees and people being forced to flee their homes. When I was back in the UK, actually, it was around the time of Extinction Rebellion and the youth strikes that I just kind of woke up to it, and I had this real moment where I internalized what it meant that our planet, our shared home, was at risk, and what that meant right now and what it meant for my own kids. And I just felt that I had to dedicate more time to it. And as it happened, I ended up speaking to some mums, and we formed this group called Mothers Rise Up, which was, in very much in part inspired by the youth strikes. But our feeling was we can't leave it to the next generation to sort out, a crisis, an existential crisis that has been caused by our generation. So we are just a group of kind of volunteer mums from different backgrounds who have been campaigning on the climate crisis for the last year or so. We're doctors, we're business people, we're charity workers like myself. It's a whole mix of women. And this action around Downing Street is something that had been planned actually for a while, but we had to postpone it because of lockdown. And then we kind of reincarnated it and resurrected it in light of what had happened because of the pandemic. And as we all know, it is a bit of a cliche, but we really are at a crossroads moment when it comes to the environment. The scientists have told us that we've got 10 to 15 years to really get a grip on it, to limit dangerous global overheating. And now, because governments and business are going to be putting kind of trillions worldwide, I'm speaking trillions of dollars into recovery packages, we really got to make sure that that money is invested into a low carbon economy rather than going back to kind of the outdated fossil fuel economy of the past. And that's what we were calling for in our letter, that we need to use this moment to build back better. And that means being really clever about where all this money is going to go, making sure that there are green strings attached to the bailouts for industries, but also making this a collective effort, because it is going to take all of us. It's going to take business, it's going to take brands, it's going to take regular citizens, and of course governments, to create a greener, fairer future. And and there's nothing more at stake, is there? It's the future of our shared home. So I'll leave it there for now.
No, that's amazing, and the images were so striking of you guys with your turbines standing there. So it was really kind of heartening as well to see the kids out as well, along with you. And
so I'll just add that it was a joint collaboration with Parents for Future UK, who are part of the global Parents for Future movement that support the youth strikers. So if you look at the Twitter feed for @Mothers Rise Up and also for @Parents for Future UK, you'll see all of the images as well as the letter from the prominent parents, who include people like Paul Polman, Martha Lane Fox, who set up lastminute.com, and actors, scientists, teachers, doctors, and many others from across society.
All of the people that we need to bring on the journey. And so I think that brings us, interestingly as well, to Ali and Extreme E, and the kind of what building back better looks like for an entertainment property at this time, and looking at how your product can also influence and challenge what has come before.
Well, thanks very much, Chloe, and very, very happy to be on this panel, and thanks for including us. We're very different because we're a sport, and you don't often think of a sport and climate change to be, intertwined as much as we are. And what we really felt was we sat through a presentation from the BBC about 18 months ago, where there was a Deloitte scrape of all programming formats in the UK outside of news, and seeing what was the most popular. And of course, Brexit was number one. I think God was number two. The surprising one was cake was number three, and that's the baking cakes. And down at number 36 was climate change. So effectively, the format of the session was to challenge entertainment developers and program makers to think about ways and means that we could connect with the general public about the biggest topic of our time, which I think Maya articulated so well, which is climate change. And you know, the point is, whether it's 10 or whether it's 15 or whether it's 20, it's not a huge amount of time to act, and to act quickly. And what we felt was, we wanted specifically to use motorsports, which has a long history of developing technology, and that can be fuel injection, that can be traction control, but it also can be things like seat belts or wing mirrors, where they've taken racing, they've put some really smart engineers and mechanics and drivers together, and they've created innovation. And what we wanted to do was, we wanted to use that sort of format that racing is very good at, to help accelerate the move to electric vehicles. And really what we have is, we have a championship called Extreme E, which is an off-road championship. We're racing in damaged locations across the globe. So those are locations where there used to be a ice shelf there. It doesn't exist anymore because it's melted, and we drive on the areas which have been eroded. So whether it's sea level rise, whether it's deforestation, we drive in some of those horrific locations. And what we do is, we give the car industry and wider industry the ability to not only innovate using competition, but also to break down the barriers to electrification. So typically what you say to people is, you say electric vehicle, and they'll say Prius. Doesn't have any range, it's too expensive, and lack of performance. And what we do is, we put these fantastic athletes in these cars. We create an exciting jeopardy and exciting challenges with these incredible backdrops. And we allow people to understand that electric cars are the future, that electric cars can help us to deal with 30% of global emissions, which is transportation. And that we need to move, and we need to use sport not only to help accelerate innovation, but to inspire people to make the difference and to prove that these will work. So, you know, I'm not saying that we have the solution by ourselves, but I think what you're seeing on these panels is that each of us, in our own way, is trying to speak to different communities about the importance of dealing with climate change. And we happen to be doing that through the power of sports. And we are actually a sport that has been created for purpose. And we're really excited about launching next year. So just quickly, we are 12 teams. We've bought our own ship. We are going to deal with rising sea levels in Senegal, desertification in the Middle East, the melting ice caps in Greenland, melting glaciers in the Himalayas, and then deforestation in the Amazon next year. So I hope all of you look out for it. It's something that will be on free-to-air television, and also heavily promoted on social media. And we hope is going to be the next big sport to hit our screens.
I'm sure it will. And also, I think there's the point also that we've spoken about around legacy and leaving places better than you find them. I think what we've seen in the world, and a lot of the stuff that we've seen historically, which has brought us to this point, is people leaving things worse than when they found them. And I think one of the important key factors of Extreme E is also that kind of legacy piece.
And Chloe, it's a really good point. We have a panel of expert scientists that are all experts in their field. So whether it's rising sea levels, or whether it's glacier ice melt, and what we use them for is to help to communicate the accurate story, what's going on, what's behind it all, educate the drivers, educate people involved in the series, so they can communicate more clearly. But they also help us to ensure that the location we're going to is the right location. We're not going to damage the ecosystem by racing there. And then they're in charge of ensuring that we have an effective legacy program. So to give you an example, we're working with the Nature Conservatory in Brazil, and we're reforesting an area which is equivalent to the race area. So that's a great one. In Senegal, where we're racing, we're planting over 1 million mangroves, which again are incredible at protecting from sea level rise and storm damage, but also are incredible stores of carbon. So legacy is our number one purpose, and we're doing that in terms of developing technology and the macro field, but we're also doing that on a very localized basis in terms of very specific legacy programs, which not only leave it in the way that we expect, but we actually improve and we invest in the local economy there.
Amazing. So interesting to hear about, and also documenting. So that brings us on neatly to Sam and WaterBear Network, a platform for documentaries focused on the environment with interactive features. So you tell us more about how that can help to drive this building back better as you see it, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Chloe, and thanks, Daniela, and everyone at the PRCA for having us, and great to be here with many friends, including Ali, Extreme E, and Maya. It's nice to meet you. I think we've got lots to talk about going forward, having listened to your introduction, which is exciting. I'm Sam. I'm the head of strategy at WaterBear, sitting in our lovely sunny Amsterdam office, feeling very lucky right now. As I know, lots of other people are still at home, but we've managed to get back to the office. WaterBear is very simply, the first interactive streaming platform that's totally dedicated to our planet. Our core mission is to bring storytelling and content to a world of amazing partners and purpose-driven organizations that exist around the world. We're working with over 70 nonprofits now to help tell their story. And as Chloe, as you said, the real kind of interactivity element is a way of us, inspiring and motivating people to take action. So that kind of means different things for different people. And what we want to do is really inspire people and give them the tools at their fingertips, to actually do more, donate, book travel, buy sustainable products, even get out there and volunteer. So what we really try to do is, work with these amazing organizations, some of the most inspirational nonprofits at the moment that, we certainly know of, from everyone from kind of Greenpeace to WWF to some more local organizations on the ground in different countries. And we kind of flip the model on its head a little bit, and we kind of work with them and find out what their stories are, some of the stories that haven't necessarily been told. And we do it a little bit differently, and we come with both the kind of funding and production skills and distribution platform for that story. And we really use our global production network to do that. The really cool thing about WaterBear is it's totally free. Anyone can access it from wherever they are. We're a mobile platform and app, so people can actually download and watch this content and engage with this content wherever they are for absolutely free. And that's really core for us in terms of our value proposition as we kind of move forward into this kind of post-COVID world. The other kind of core point of this is really that for the first time, I think you can access all of these amazing organizations in one place, and that aggregation, that consolidation, I think is one of the core values that's missing a little bit from, the challenge to actually build back better. And that's something that we're really interested in, is how we can bring collaboration and community and togetherness into, the world in this kind of post-COVID environment. I think that is one of the, glimmers of hope that has come from this crazy period, is that there's been this empathy, there's been this value shift towards something that's, really about community and about who's around you and how we work together and how we actually change the future together. And I think that value hopefully is something that we can bring forward into a post-COVID world. Although looking at the news over the weekend, post-COVID seems a little bit premature, I think. But, we're really, really excited to actually bring WaterBear to market later this year in November, when we launch globally. And, it's not going to market alone. We're going to market with all these amazing organizations that hopefully will come with us on this journey and allow us to tell their story and aggregate that all together in one place. I think, just finally about WaterBear, it's been the most amazing journey to actually be doing this through COVID and trying to build our company back better throughout this COVID period. And what's really exciting is we've got there and we've got this new amazing team, and we'll actually be pushing through to launch later this year. I think just finally, the power of story is something that has emerged throughout this process. And this is really our core focus at WaterBear. It's using the power of story to inspire people do more and you know, take action and become inspired and motivated and learn about some of these amazing organizations, but also some of these critical issues of our time. And that storytelling lens is something that, you know, we need to use in a maybe more strategic way. I think for the last you know, number of years, there's been a big focus on scare tactics, on maybe doom mongering and quite scary, you know, big things that for lots of people, it's a little bit too far away and too far removed. And I think, you know, what we need to do now is really focus on the inspiration and creating a new future, a new lens for something that's going to be, you know, inspirational for us to aspire to. And I think now what we need to do is really focus on building that through technology and allowing people to actually take action instantly. And I think shortening that action gap is something that we're really excited about through WaterBear. So I think, you know, building back better in post-COVID is a challenge. I think we need to align major budgets, you know, at the, you know, systemic and governance level. That's, you know, happening at the top end. And I think for us, it's about how we mobilize individual actions, but then collate all those individual actions together in one place and achieve hopefully great change through scale. So we're really excited to bring WaterBear to market and really excited to bring it along with so many great friends and collaborators.
It's great. Thanks so much, Sam. And thanks. It's really interesting to hear, you know, I think as Ali pointed out, you're all talking about how to engage with these different audiences and how to do it in a really sort of interesting and dynamic way. And I guess it's interesting because our last session we had last week was with our youth panel, and one of the things that came up was very much about the importance of companies engaging authentically on major social issues like climate change, and just wondered, you know, how you think organizations like yourselves and others, you know, brands and companies can engage with key audiences really authentically on this issue. You know, how you see, you know, the ways of building up that trust. And I think, Ali, you've talked before about partnerships and sort of building partnerships which can really create that trust as well. Do you want to maybe go first, Ali?
Yeah, not a problem at all. I think it's interesting because we've looked at this in numerous ways. I mean, we're going on this journey. We're effectively a media product, and we really need to find partners that share the same values as us and want to you know, target the issues. And it's been interesting because we've got people like Continental, who are partnering with us from a tire point of view. They have a product which is a dandelion product, which is it's a substrate that they can make a rubber equivalent from essentially a weed. So this obviously grows in areas that aren't tropical. You get numerous harvests per year. And it could be a big innovation for the whole industry. And what they want to do is they want to test this, and they want to see whether this will work in extreme environments. So, you know, the product itself will be able to be tested in you know, real heat, real cold altitudes, and so on. But that's a good example of purpose. And I think, you know, what you're seeing now is, you know, COVID is something that we should have all been preparing for, and we should have been able to weather far better than we have. And the fact is we didn't prepare for it. And, you know, we're seeing the economic impact of not preparing for a massive issue. You know, if you look at climate change, it's got the ability to be 100 times worse. And, you know, businesses have to be part of the solution. So what we're finding that there are a lot of businesses out there that are changing, that are looking at how they can develop. You know, and I think this is an opportunity for us to partner with them to help to tell their story in a way where, you know, maybe traditional means haven't been able to communicate that. I'm not sure how many people follow Continental on their social platforms, but using sports and using the storytelling that we've got mean that it's very innovative in terms of developing those sort of propositions. And again, we're speaking to numerous people, whether it's financial companies that are investing in you know, making that transition to not invest in fossil fuels, and they want to communicate that they're doing that, you know, to mining companies that are looking at, you know, how do they reuse mines? What's the equivalent way of repairing, reusing, and what can they do and how they can get involved? So, you know, what we're looking at is we're looking at like-minded people that have the same objective, which is tackling climate change. Businesses need to come in. You know, it's very important that we have campaigners, but it's very important that those campaigners shine the spotlight, and then business takes that further, and that we get real engagement from partners to actually tackling this problem, because it's not something that Sam at WaterBear is going to tackle on his own, or Maya's going to, or I'm going to tackle it. It's the collective nature, and getting more people on the bus, and getting people to move in that direction. Time is against us, and we need to act.
That's great. Really interesting. Thank you. And I guess on that note of partnerships, Sam, you mentioned earlier about partnerships with WWF, etc. So how do you sort of see that, obviously, in terms of how, you know, that authentic engagement that you can have with audiences through your channels?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Ali, really. We are, you know, the role of companies going forward in this fight for the future is critical. We're not just building a network at WaterBear of non-profits. I think we all know the future is a massively blurred line between non-profit and for-profit, and we're seeing that revolution already happening now. And I think the change is coming from, you know, C-suite leadership down to employees and you know, society and communities, you know, demanding change. For us, that's exactly how we designed our business. You know, what we're doing is using a really cool innovation with the technology to actually engage companies to help transmit their sustainability story, hopefully to a new audience through a new lens. And that's massively essential when it comes to, you know, authentic communications with companies and brands. It's not about selling more products. It's about really effectively and transparently communicating what they are doing, their successes, and most importantly, their failures, you know, and being really, really transparent with where they're going on the journey, and how others and, you know, the community and the partnerships that are around them can help them do that. I think story, again, you know, it's our core focus at WaterBear. It's to, you know, work with these companies to help tell that story in a different way through different formats, and hopefully engage different audiences in that journey, because I think this lens that we give with storytelling is something that's really new and innovative, and allows us to engage with, you know, different, you know, demographics, especially the youth. And I think those younger audiences are actually demanding change, you know, within these companies as they go work for these companies. You know, we're seeing, I think I saw a stat the other day that said, you know, 2/3 of Oxbridge graduates are now going off to work for social enterprises. And, you know, that is going to have trickle up effects from, you know, the bottom up. It's going to create a new narrative and create new opportunities for these companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really interesting. And the whole sort of youth audiences, it's so important to reach them. I think the session we had last week really underlined that. And Maya, obviously that's a big part of your work as well. Any thoughts and comments in terms of, you know, that engagement?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I completely agree with what Sam said about the power of storytelling to inspire action. And it's something that we've been thinking about a lot as Mothers Rise Up, and also as the global network that I'm part of called Our Kids Climate, which brings together parent climate leaders from about 20 different countries. So we're speaking to people in India, in Brazil, in across different countries in Africa, and thinking about how we can tell stories that are relevant to their contexts, but also can speak to what is a global issue. And I think there has to be a balance, though, between kind of inspiration, but also being honest about the magnitude of the crisis that we face. I think a lot of the scaremongering can be disempowering. I think part of our motivation for forming our group was that we wanted to use kind of the values of love and stewardship and family and community. We know that those are values that cut across different ideological and political boundaries, in this sense of being stewards of our planet. So I think there is a really powerful story that can be told about what one generation leaves to the next. And there are different projects working precisely on that. And then there's also, I think, the image of parents and particularly in our case of mother and child. I think, you know, you'll know better than I from the PR world about how often people reach out to mothers as consumers, but what we're trying to do is to kind of empower mothers to act in a more political way as citizens. And then I think to your question about what brands can do to speak authentically, I mean, I would kind of turn that on its head a bit and say that I think the most important thing is to think about what action brands are going to take to address the climate crisis, and thinking about some of the issues that are raised, for example, by the idea of a well-being economy and a regenerative economy that are set out by people like the economist Kate Raworth, who also signed our letter. You know, what does that mean? There are really big questions around that, and then being honest, as Sam said, about the opportunities, but also, I guess, some of the challenges in making those changes. I think people are hungry for an honest story rather than just for kind of the nicely packaged one. Because we know it's a big, you know, it's going to be a painful transition in many ways, to move away from a fossil fuel economy, but it is one that I believe, you know, we can and must do.
Absolutely. I think, and I love that point. It's actually really true, rather than them, you know, brands talking about what they're doing. It's actually what meaningful change they're actually doing. And that makes it really easy to talk about if they're doing something good and positive.
I think also a point that that each person has touched on is around the need for storytelling to engage. So whether it be the film content or the narrative behind families and mothers coming together, and indeed the dandelion tire. Did I say that? Dandelion tire? Being something which is kind of, you know, this is an opportunity to test. And if we don't care about things, we're not aware of them, we're not going to make change happen. So I think, as we've seen, content creation has changed quite dramatically over the past 5 years, how we consume it, how the kind of, I mean, aside from the cake consumption, the different kinds of ways that we're looking at news, and also the kind of how much of that information we can take on, whether it's bite size or kind of actually big issues, if we know what those solutions look like and that we're working towards them as a community. So with that in mind, and how much content creation has changed in the past 5 years, 5 more years, how would you see it possible to, how do you see the possibility of engaging wider audiences? Do you think they're going to be, I mean, obviously you all hope that they're going to be more engaged, but in terms of actual kind of practical cut through and things that you think are possible in terms of new content? Sam.
Couldn't agree more, Chloe. I think content has evolved enormously and continues to evolve every day, it seems, with new platforms and new distribution opportunities for the stories that we tell. I think formats and distribution channels are also one thing. And I think actually what's really interesting, as we can see now, is a change in how stories are told and how stories are engaged with. And I think for maybe 30 years over history, you know, there's been a real focus, especially in our industry, of telling stories in quite big, scary, stats-driven, you know, dark and depressing ways. And I think actually now people are very, you know, clear on the data that actually people are engaging with stories that are inspirational and focus on solutions and offer opportunities and hope and change that lens for the future. I think what's really interesting actually is natural history filmmaking, which is the world that we come from, is actually one of the most carbon intensive forms of filmmaking there is, you know, and that's a little bit of a kind of dissonance, you know, to think actually what we're trying to do is go out and protect and showcase these species, but actually we're costing a lot to actually go and do it. So I think what we need to do now is actually change how those stories are produced. And you know, from WaterBear's perspective, we're looking to create and engage a global production network so that we know if we want to go and tell a story here, you know, we have people on the ground who are local, they're diverse, youthful, and actually wanting to tell stories and resonate with stories in a way that works for them, rather than the idea of a foreign camera crew arriving, getting what they need, and then, you know, disappearing back with stories for their home audiences. There's still a place for both. It's not a kind of slight on one or the other, but I think alongside that more traditional method, we really need, local diverse storytellers with access to amazing kit. And I think, kit has now come on so far that it is accessible, and that's what people can really do. I think just the final point for me in how we get audiences to engage, people are really busy. People are really, really busy. And, it's a little bit tricky when you're trying to get people to always do more and take action on issues when, they're dealing with stuff every day, not to mention COVID, but, even in pre-COVID or post-COVID, that's bills, family, illness, healthcare, kids, schools. And actually to say, come on, you need to do more can often be a little bit frictional, I think, and can create not the desired effect of some of the kind of opportunities to do more. I actually, I Googled, how can I help with climate change the other day? And I think got 664 million hits back. And you kind of think that's a little bit of a broken user experience, to actually Google something like that and then be just overwhelmed with kind of information overload. And, I think this is everything we're really trying to change at WaterBear now, to give a kind of safe portal, one-stop shop effectively to come and engage with these issues. And when you do feel inspired through the storytelling, you can actually take action. And hopefully this will be a way to tell stories in really local ways and engage a wider audience through that combination of kind of watching, connecting, and then taking action.
Great, thank you. And Maya, with I guess storytelling comes into a lot of the work that you're doing, but how do you see that kind of content creation and content generally kind of working with the idea of that terrifying number that Sam just gave us for results from Google?
Yeah, it is, and it is such a fragmented space as well, and we all know that we're in our own Twitter or social media bubble. I mean, I think for us, we're a volunteer-led group, so we just don't have access to kind of some of the platforms and the materials that you're discussing here. But what works for us is that authentic story. It is the shot of us kind of out there protesting, singing our songs, and it really works, and it can have a lot of reach, and it is often just kind of a very, very simple message from the front line, as it were. And I think it really speaks to Sam's point about giving voice to local and diverse voices, so people see themselves represented, and they are creating the content themselves, they are creating the story. But we're also collaborating with illustrators so that we can imagine and reimagine what this new tomorrow, what this future might look like. Because, as we've been hearing, kind of facts don't move people. We need to create a positive vision. And I think content has a really important role in doing that. And, thinking about animation and images and kind of collaborating with the science, that collaboration between science and art and culture is just so powerful. So I think it's really, it's really exciting.
And from exciting to extreme. And Ali, in terms of that new format, a new form of communicating, I mean, obviously you are taking it to an extreme.
Yeah, I think I can't remember whether it was Sam or whether it was Maya, but it was it goes back to old-fashioned storytelling. I think unless you can tell a story that's engaging, you're wasting your time. And ultimately, what we're looking at is how do we take sport, which is incredibly powerful and incredibly engaging, and tell a slightly different story weaved into that sport. That's our particular challenge. But if we're successful with that, it's got incredible broadness in terms of its communication. Because, if you look at, some of the most popular sports in the world, Formula One stands out there as one of the biggest. So if we're able to get a fraction of people that in the community that watch sports, if we get a decent fraction of them, we'll be communicating to a whole new audience, which has a whole new impact. But I think for us, the importance is that it has to be a sport first, it has to be engaging, it has to be jeopardy. We have to have winners and losers, and we have to provide the core attributes of sports. And if we're able to do that engagement, we can then go much, much deeper in terms of our storytelling. And I think Sam mentioned it earlier, but what was quite interesting is there's been this shortness. So everything's gone from from long documentaries, cut to short form. And I think what we're finding is there's spaces for short form and long form and everything in between. There's absolutely space because we're all busier in our lives. So we might want something that's snackable. We might want 30 seconds. We might want 3 minutes. Might want 30 minutes. We might want 2 hours. But I think us as creators, we have to be more flexible in terms of creating different bit sizes which help the consumer appetite, because it is so fragmented now. You know, one size doesn't fit all. You don't stick it on BBC One and catch the whole population. I mean, if my kids are anything to go by, neither of them watch traditional linear television. So if you're only fishing in linear, you're not going to get the youth of tomorrow that we want to be communicating with. So I think it's about having numerous distribution points, but ultimately coming back to the point that both Sam and Maya talked about, which is, you know, great stories told about great people and capturing people's imaginations. Because if you don't do that, you can forget everything else. It just won't resonate.
Thank you. I think that's a key part of it, isn't it? Is actually that kind of the storytelling and the narrative and the connection, allowing empathy and change to happen, allowing that pool to open up.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And actually that brings us very nicely, Ali, your last point in terms of, you know, how you communicate to the results of our poll, because we've got some results come through. So it might be interesting to see some answers to the questions. It's on Twitter, people can carry on voting. It'll be open for a while, but just sort of some initial results here. So the first question was, the environment needs to be the backbone of the global COVID-19 recovery. What sources of communication will be the most effective in telling this story? The options were educational entertainment, newspapers or broadcast, government messaging, and charity and NGO messaging. And actually 50% went for educational entertainment. So there you go. Only 12.5% going for sort of traditional newspapers and broadcast. And 31% for government messaging. So government messaging is still important. And only 6%, 6.3% for charity and NGO messaging. So obviously educational entertainment is the way forward. You guys will be pleased to hear. The second question, what should businesses do to prioritise the environment? The first one was sustainability policy, review supply chains, advocate for the environment, or donate to charities, and overwhelming response for sustainability policies. I think most companies tend to have or talk about having sustainability policies, so 46.7% still think that's the most important, but advocating for the environment, second place with 33%, and reviewing supply chains at 20%. With donations to charities, actually 0. Nobody thinks that that's what businesses should be doing, which is interesting. And the final question was, after COVID, what should be the priority for businesses? Economic recovery, diversity and inclusion, climate change, or employee and customer health. And economic recovery comes top, perhaps unsurprisingly, 47%, 47.1%. Climate change does come second, though, 29.4%, followed by employee customer health, which comes at 23.5%. And 0 for diversity and inclusion, which is interesting, but perhaps maybe that's not considered a priority relating to COVID, I'm not sure. Anyway, so those are the initial results. As I say, the poll's still open, so if you want to go on the PRCA channel on Twitter, carry on voting, feel free to retweet, feel free to comment if you think the results are outrageous or have a view on them, but quite interesting to hear different views. I don't know if we've got any questions in the...
on the first result about NGO messaging and that coming in last, which I understand why it has done, but I think there's a really interesting subtlety there, which is about, if you are a local charity who works on the ground somewhere in the world, you focus 99.9% of your efforts on delivering the program that you are in charge of delivering. So whether that's planting trees, educating children, building a school. And actually storytelling is the thing that always gets left behind. And that's why I think people haven't necessarily resonated with some of the NGO and charity messaging as much as they could have done over the past few years, and actually going way back into history. And I think what we really need to do now is work with these organizations in a collaborative way and actually try and bring a storytelling and filmic lens to their work and actually find the story, not just campaign and say, this is what we do, please either feel good or bad about it, and then please give some money, but actually work with these organizations to find their stories and produce those stories and distribute those stories. And it's a very different way of tackling, the communications around that issue. And I think it's something at WaterBear that we're really excited about. And actually having conversations with 70 or 80 organizations around the world and finding, some of the stories that are coming our way are truly, truly exciting. So I think I understand why that's coming in last place, but I think, there's some room for maneuver there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I think that's really interesting. Thank you. Ali, Maya, any comments on those or on the poll results in general?
No, I think Sam's absolutely right. I think there's a general failure in terms of communication, but it was one of the points there where economic recovery came highest, and I'm not surprised. And I think what Maya is saying is that climate change and economic recovery don't have to be two separate choices. They can actually be the single choice, is that the investment gets focused on climate change and investment into renewables or investment into innovations which can help us tackle this massive problem. So I think, they've been very binary in terms of A or B, but in many ways, if the two were together, I think you'd probably have the majority of people agreeing with that.
Makes sense, doesn't it? And also those options are there to look at, as we're seeing with the green recovery that Amsterdam are taking a push in.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking out at it right now.
Yeah, they've got the donut model. No, but I agree. It's not a false. It's in a way, it's a kind of, you're setting up a false choice. The point on NGO and campaigning is somewhat sobering, having worked with NGOs for over a decade. But I would just say in their defense that there's a lot of unbranded NGO campaigning that's not necessarily recognized as coming, that is out there kind of in the public consciousness, and is not, that has been produced by NGOs, but they haven't put their name to it. And they're doing more of that. And that's, I think, really, really important. And WWF, who aren't here today, they're a great example of an organization that's been supporting the youth strikers, for example, behind the scenes. So NGO campaigning isn't always kind of so straight jacketed and brand focused. The unbranded part of what they do is really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's really true. Thank you very much. So I don't know how much time we've got really for more questions. I haven't seen too many more coming through, but I wondered whether you have some closing comments from the panelists. If you've got anything in particular you'd like to close with, we can then sort of wrap up the session. But if there's anything you'd like to say beforehand.
Or not.
Or not. I don't know whether we've got time. Whether we've got time for maybe one last question. Maybe Kiri, how long have we got?
I think we've got a few minutes. There is one question that came through, which was, what advice would you give to other businesses on how they can make their practices more sustainable or environmentally beneficial?
Shall I maybe answer this, because we've gone through this ourselves, which is, I think you've just got to understand where you are in terms of what your footprint is, and I'm sure we've all looked at it, but it's fascinating to understand. Our previous business was formerly, and when we looked at it, 75% of our carbon emissions came from transportation and air transportation. And so when we set up Extreme, one of the first things we did was looked at having a season that was more spread out, because we're moving everything from A to B by ship now. And what that does is it reduces our carbon footprint by around about 2/3. So, it sounds a simple thing, but once you understand it and once you understand the figures, you can then deal with it, and you can get your staff involved in terms of dealing with it. And I think that's the point, is it can't be ivory tower. It's got to be something that a business understands. And then once you understand it, you can take steps to address it. And we can all do our part. We can do our part through our business, and we can do our part in terms of our household and what we do. And of course, we're trying to talk people into going electric vehicles, or, you know, if they have a vehicle and public transport, if they don't, and walking and cycling if they really can do it. So, you know, there's a lot of different options out there.
I think, as you say as well, it's about that kind of honest conversation and what you're willing to take a look at. And then there are, I mean, we're seeing it all the time, there are businesses that are coming up that are looking at how you explore your carbon footprint, how you find out this information. So rather than being overwhelmed by how do I tackle everything, it's more sort of your own house in order, your own business in order, and what the options are for those things. But until you explore what the challenges are, it's you know, then it becomes the insurmountable kind of task.
We've got one question here actually from Cheryl Clark, who said, the title of this discussion is Prioritizing the Environment. Have the panel thought about a different way of describing it rather than othering it? We are the environment. How might we better explore the language around this message?
I think that's a very great question from Cheryl. There's a few questions there which we can maybe dive into, but I think Cheryl's absolutely right. I think we need to have a global shift in how we talk about humans in relation to our natural world. And for many, many years, it's been an us and them narrative. It's been a concept of, you know, what's out there, what's over there, and how do we engage with that world. I think what we now need to do is tell stories that involve people as part of the natural world. And I think that is changing and happening all the time. It's not something new, but I think it needs to be ramped up and scaled up so we feel as though we are part of the natural world. And I think the other thing is at the youth level, I think people are really disconnected from nature overall. You know, people are growing up in urbanized environments and having absolutely no relationship with the natural world throughout their young developmental years. And it's no surprise, therefore, that if you look at charitable fundraising and you look at the percentage of funds that go to human-based fundraisers versus, you know, natural world and environmental fundraisers, it's incomparable. There are some great organizations leading the charge for the environment and fundraising and raising lots of money, but as a global total, it's a fraction. And I think that's really where we need to change. We need to get kids out into nature from a very early age. We need to, you know, green up cities, which is happening. And as I say, you know, frame the conversation with us and them as much more as humans as part of nature.
Yeah, can I just jump in there? I completely agree. And there's quite a lot of research and evidence that shows the language of home and a shared home, you know, it resonates much more than the environment. And that's certainly kind of the language we use, and we've run campaigns around this theme of our planet, our home, which we know speaks to people and they can visualize it. I mean, on this question of interconnections, it's tricky because once everything starts getting connected, it can almost feel too much. But actually, I think those interconnections are really important. And I actually think the young people and the youth movement and the youth climate movement have been very effective at making the connections between, for example, systemic racism, fighting the climate crisis and social justice. So when you put, I think on your poll, you had these kind of, you know, it's a poll. So by nature, you had to pick one over the other. But I actually think, you know, they are all interconnected. So when brands are thinking about diversity and inclusion, that is also going to help them to tackle things or tackle questions of environmental racism and the climate crisis. And then thinking about, you know, who can speak and how to, and within the company, who can speak truth to power and so on. So I do think we need to find a way to hold all of these interconnections. It's not easy to do. And that is, again, when you can bring in storytelling, because it can seem very abstract and kind of too big to chew. But I think we do need to bring in some of the kind of the other questions that we've been thinking about. And I think that's where, there's another kind of big issue, but that's where in a way the environmental movement, I think, has failed over the years, because it has been seen as very elitist and cut off and not speaking to people's kind of real world realities. You know, if you're struggling to heat your home, or if you're thinking about paying the bills, that's becoming much more acute for people during the time of COVID, and somebody is telling you to kind of watch your carbon footprint and recycle. it can really miss the mark. And that's why some of the language about climate emergency is important, because it has moved governments, but it also, I think, has that hasn't resonated with people, who are facing kind of an everyday emergency in their living standards. So we need to think quite carefully about how we hold all of these kind of competing challenges together.
I think also interesting from your background, Maya, of looking at kind of being focused on humanitarian issues, and that kind of now we're seeing the future issues around kind of environmental refugees and mass migration due to the impact of the climate crisis. And again, sort of that interconnection, and the fact that, I think it was at one of the extremely talks that I believe it was David who said, the planet will actually be fine. It will just get rid of us. And so if we don't see ourselves as connected to the planet, that's our loss, because the planet will regenerate and keep going, but not with us on it.
And connected to each other. And we need to think about this question of global solidarity, because the way that, again, one of the reasons that I've struggled with the environmental movement is the way that mass migration was kind of used as a way to scare people. Although there might be, and that is really damaging to those of us who've been kind of refugee and migrant advocates, and for many years, and obviously the people themselves that are affected. So yeah.
Well, I think Penny would be very glad that you brought those issues up, because I know that she wanted to talk about that interconnectivity and a lot about systemic change as well. So,
good.
So thank you.
I'm glad I channeled her without even realizing.
Yes, exactly. So I think probably we're time's up. So we'll just wrap up. I'd love to thank our fabulous panelists. Thank you so much, Sam and Ali and Maya. You were all fantastic, especially Maya stepping in at the last. Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us this afternoon, and also to Kiri and everyone at the PRCA. Please do follow the poll on Twitter and add on if you haven't voted yet. We are going to be having our third and final summer series session on purpose next Monday, same time at 5 o'clock. But this time it's going to be focusing on brands and how brands can use creativity and innovation to drive change. So hope you can all join us. Thank you again, everyone, and hope everyone enjoyed it.